Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
Welcome to episode 239 of the Broadcasters Podcast. This is KOP. We're going to continue on with the DCEU debacle, as we talked about last week with the issues regarding Batgirl being shelved, among other things that are going on because of the now changes from CEO David Zaslav at Warner Brothers Discovery. The changes being made, we talked about a lot, where HBO Max and Discovery are going to be merging together, and the DC universe is going to get a reboot or a reset with a couple of movies that are going to be able to be released after all, with some other ones that are in the works not being pushed out right away because of the change and the change of thinking into a 10-year plan for the DC universe, because they're not doing side characters. They want to focus on the main characters. So as Zaslav said in the earnings call, and he made a point in a lot of discussions, as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are the major focuses, with some of the others in the Justice League also taking point. Those are the ones that need to be concerned with the most, aside from the sidekicks. Because, put it like this too, when you look at the movies they put out, I mean, it's one thing for certain movies to have just been stellar and did so well off the bat. I mean, when you look at the decision to go ahead and, create another Aquaman that'll be released next year, originally scheduled to be out this year, that's going to pull some good money because it did last time. With Joker, which was just a phenomenal hit with Todd Phillips directing and Joaquin Phoenix in the role, the fact they're going to do a second one now, that looks amazing too. Batman also doing very well coming off of pandemic in the March of this year. Even with the short window, it still performed very well. To the point I went and watched it twice. And then Shazam, which was a Christmas movie that you didn't even expect it to just come out so well, but it did. And it performed very well. And so you say to yourself, okay, so you see what movies are going to come out because of the performance they're going to have. Even the League of Super Pets did really well, making $45 million so far. I forget how much it's made so far altogether. But the Shazam of April 2019, worldwide, $363 million. And that was a movie you didn't expect to do so well, but it did. And then you'll have this coming out, and then you'll see how it works out. With DC League of Super Pets, $88 million worldwide. It's an animated movie. It wasn't going to be too much over the top. But what they're doing with these movies, and the plan to go and shelve things and move things around, it's concerning, and it's going to get this fandom distraught, which they already are. If you look at the TikTok feeds out there, and just some of the commentators out there, probably on Reddit and Twitter and all social media, there's a lot of concern. It really did concern people partly because of, and I didn't focus too much on it last week, because we focused more on the fact that the HBO Max Discovery merger was going to be coming into place, and that was the plan. Meanwhile, we thought HBO Max might have gotten shelved altogether. We don't know what that's going to be yet. We don't know where HBO is going to continue to stay as a brand and how it will stay as a brand. We don't know that yet either. But some way, somehow, they're going to keep it around, and it's because of the fact that David Zaslav is a little more of a traditionalist when it comes to the mind of media. He still sees value in movie theaters, especially with these superhero movies, and I agree. And with streaming and trying to compete with the streaming services that are out there compared to others, what we're going to see eventually, we're already starting to see price hikes. Now, 2020 was the year we saw the rise of all these streaming services coming out. People still had a pretty good appetite for all this content, but it's still so hard to keep up with all that's going on. Still hundreds of shows coming out every year. Who's going to keep up with it and know which one's which? With only a handful of shows really getting any kind of real play. It's tough. It's very difficult, but everybody's trying to get their piece right now And there's been a race for spending as much money on content as possible to try to get as many subscribers as possible. But now we're starting to see a little bit of a slowdown. And we're starting to see some people starting to go ahead and pull back on their subscriptions. And there's only going to be so many T-Mobiles and Amazons and, Walmarts out there that are going to be helping out to bundle up this here. Because there's still going to be a cut that goes to these companies. What about the Netflixes of the world? They're putting a price hike up. Disney Plus now looking at a price hike. Hulu at a price hike. It's all going to happen. Because of the negligence of the traditional medium, right? The linear medium or media that's out there of cable and network television, and the failures they've had to retain the audiences on those channels. When you look at Disney, they have a continued erosion of ABC Network, a continued erosion of ESPN Network, among other things. And then they have Fox, which also has a declining Fox network, a declining FX. I don't know how Fox Sports 1's doing so well, but remember, only certain channels can do well, like an ESPN or Fox, if they have live sports. Otherwise, what do they have? When your highest rated network shows can only garner 7 million viewers, scripted or non-scripted, and they're weekly airing, and they're not live events like the Oscars or the Grammys or a live sporting event or the CMAs, whatever it is, or Miss Universe, whatever it is. And so people are looking at David Zaslav, who's gotten quite a bit of experience, to take this spot, to obviously not like what the previous CEO, Jason Kilar, was doing, being streaming first. We already know the same problem happened at Disney, too, because they were worried about putting all their eggs into the streaming basket at the detriment of the linear platforms that they have. What do you do with that? I mean, even the Disney theme parks are also suffering too. They have a lot of issues. I'm sure still making a lot of money hand over foot, but we already see that Disney, this large conglomerate, is getting some bad play right now. People are getting concerned about it. And so these are some of the things that are going on. So last week I talked about Batgirl as a movie being dropped and shelved, and we'll never get to see Leslie Grace donning a Batgirl suit, which sucks. We're not going to see Michael Keaton training her as Batman. We're never going to see Ben Affleck maybe as the Batman character again, even though he was shot and filmed for it. That's a lot. And so this audience really is concerned about it. They're very worried about what happens next. But these corporate decisions, I used to call this show corporate, creative, not corporate, because of the fact that creativity took a backseat to corporate decisions. Because if they have, and this is, by the way, they're taking content that's kind of being rehashed, recreating Batgirl, recreating The Flash, all these different things to put them into franchises. They think it's intellectual property and milk it for what you can, which is what Star Wars and all the Disney intellectual property and all the Marvel stuff's been done with by Disney, because they have to do it. They're going to take whatever their property is and multiply it and amplify it as much as they can to keep people involved and engaged. That's going to be tough. So let's go ahead and give more of the epilogue of Batgirl and what happened. Screen Rant talks about the full story. David Miller writes about it and says, this is the story that's been talked about as well as to why Batgirl was considered not to be released. The idea was that it was going to be set in an altered version of the mainstream DCEU timeline, which the DCEU franchise's new management no longer wants. They want to stick to the main characters, then go into the side characters. Take the Marvel plan of what they did with the Avengers, and now moving on into Doctor Strange and Shin Lee and all these other movies, right? Shang-Chi, excuse me. I said that completely wrong. Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings. And I went and saw that movie, so sorry. I'm not the super fanboy DC Marvel person, but I watch most of all of these movies in the theater anyway. Even Eternals. Yeah. So they're saying that WB Discovery is now seeking a new direction for this DCEU, focusing on tentpole blockbuster films centering on the big three: Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. So Batman was meant to be on HBO Max. What is known about its story and setting suggests its narrative is similarly insular, making it conflict with the DC's new direction and multiple levels. The Flash, which is the next DCEU movie also coming up, is intended to alter the franchise's timeline. Much like the DC Comics storyline Flashpoint, the Flash will have Barry Allen travel through time across the multiverse to save his mother, only to change his present. And Michael Keaton would return as Batman, and Ben Affleck, exiting the role of the Dark Knight, was serving as a soft reboot for the DCEU, and since Batgirl was going to take place after The Flash, it would acquaint viewers with the new DCEU in addition to introducing Barbara Gordon. So it still doesn't make sense if we're going to still have the Batman character coming in to go ahead and go forward just to tell this Flash storyline. I don't know. Maybe it's just a little too much. So now Batgirl's version of Batman would not have been the same character that Michael Keaton played in the Tim Burton films. The footage behind the scenes showed it was Batgirl showing younger versions of Barbara Gordon and J.K. Simmons' James Gordon interacting with Keaton's Batman. And the Flash's timeline alterations melded elements of the DCEU Batman and Burton's version. It doesn't apply to Batman, however, his sidekick Robin appears to be quite different from his original DCEU and Tim Burton incarnations. So they want to go ahead and just go all of it. And that the Batgirl movie would only tell Barbara Gordon's origin story in a small scale. And they would have taken liberties with the source material, according to Hollywood insider Matthew Maloney. The film had a small scale for this installment, and the plot was unfortunately quite convoluted, with Maloney reporting it was incomparable to a TV pilot. And this, along with Batgirl's continuity being incompatible with the vision, contributed to the film's cancellation. So the idea was, even the fact that they put $90 million in this picture, it was not being built as a feature film. And because it wasn't getting that budget for a feature film, that's the other reason why it got shelved. You can't convert it into a movie. You can't convert it into a TV series. And maybe it would have been better off if they did that, but they didn't. But the idea is already done. And Brendan Fraser would have played Firefly, the antagonist against Batgirl. And Batgirl would have included other villains. So there was a lot of things that were going to be planned, but instead, that's no longer on the schedule. And now we have movies coming out that are still on set for release. You have Black Adam coming up in October, and Aquaman coming up in March. Oh, excuse me, Shazam! Fury of the Gods is in December of this year. And then 2023, you got Aquaman March 17th. Then you got The Flash in the summer, June 23rd, and Blue Beetle on August 18th, which I don't know if Blue Beetle sticks around and stays around as a blockbuster movie that will be put out by Warner Brothers Discovery. Don't know. Couldn't really tell you right now at this moment. Then the other thing gets also caught up. With all the things that are going on, there's a lot of decisions being made that have not been made yet. So you got the Batman 2, which, you know, it looked like they were pretty much ready to go and do a sequel after the success of the Batman itself with Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz. Well, at the moment, the Batman 2 has yet to receive official green light. They haven't even started doing anything with it yet. It took in globally over $750 million, taking place in an alternate reality outside the DCEU, a standalone film similar to Todd Phillips' Joker. At CinemaCon in April 2022, they did say that Batman 2 would be happening, and Matt Reeves was brought out to the stage. And that Reeves was excited to jump back into the world for this next chapter. I don't know why they just don't go ahead and give us another Batman. It's part of the series. What are you going to do here? See, this is a mistake on DC's part. They should definitely keep going on this direction of Batman. this retelling of Batman, it works. I think it totally works. It's very dark, it's dreary, it's got that Joker feel to it. This is what this movie should be. When they decided to go this route and completely go against anything that Joel Schumacher put out, or anything that Christopher Nolan put out, something different, something that fit for this generation, was the right idea. I don't know why they didn't decide to do that. A new report from Variety also says the future may be even more uncertain as the film is apparently listed in development. And while Reeves and Pattinson are both attached to the project, the status implies the sequel will be years away, which will put more films now in development with no clear picture forward. Wonder Woman 3 is still at a moment we don't know where it's going to go next. Then you have Superman, Zatanna, Static Shock, and Black Canary all in development limbo right now. And so there's a lot of things that have to be answered. Where things are going to go with the DCEU, that's a big problem. And they're stuck right now. And then we move along about why all this is still very much in a limbo. Where the debacle continues is because of the fact that David Zaslav says he needs a czar, basically, to handle the entire DCEU franchise. So he needs to find their Kevin Feige. So Zaslav has already said in public that they want to restructure to create a team with a 10-year plan focusing just on DC. Similar to what Alan Horn and Bob Iger put together effectively with Kevin Feige at Disney. Walter Hamada has been leading the DC Films unit since 2018 and has a long-term plan for the DC Cinematic Universe and has been in the middle of implementing it. But this reset now dismisses Hamada and his team's preparations, the lack of specifics, and some mixed signals, creating an atmosphere of confusion and rampant speculation over the future of more than a dozen DC films and TV projects already in the pipeline. So the only movie right now of DC that actually is now going to be in production, that is definitely going forward, while the others are in development, is Joker Folie d'Adieu, scheduled to hit theaters in 2024. And remember, Joker, well, this is the reason, because Joker broke $1 billion. I mean, people are going to be lining up to watch this movie. Now you're also seeing that Todd Phillips expecting to get a $20 million payday for directing this movie. Lady Gaga will get $10 million. This sequel is going to cost at least $150 million to produce. Still cheaper than most superhero movies, often costing them more than $200 million, like the Batman. So they get a little more detail about the other properties that they have. That there have not been any substantive updates on these films since news of them first broke. And then the idea of the DC branded films streaming service, launching straight to streaming DC, has either been abandoned or at least imperiled with the cancellation of Batgirl. You gotta love it when one side doesn't know what they're doing, right? So Jason Kilar actually had the plan of having several prominent characters, basically taking the Disney Plus idea and putting them on HBO Max before integrating them into feature films targeted for a theatrical release. Blue Beetle, which is the first Mexican-American big screen superhero, had been part of this strategy. But instead, that movie is actually going to be pivoted. I didn't realize that's what they were doing, but they're going to pivot that into a big budget movie. It's not going to open in theaters in 2023. That is the plan now. Now, the other thing that didn't help either with Batgirl is that there was a 10-week director's cut that led to middling test scores, and that all movies in rough shape in early post-production, and Batgirl was designed to be watched on television, not a big screen, lacking the set pieces that would have goosed the score. So instead of expanding the movie into a big screen feature, it would have required reshoots, which Warner Brothers Discovery thought was a waste of money. Then there's the movie Black Canary, would be standalone with Journey Smollett reprising the role from Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn, still in development, but has not been greenlit. Now, there is word that the new chiefs of Warner Brothers Pictures are looking to mend fences with Batgirl star Leslie Grace entertaining the possibility of having her continue to play Batgirl in a future DC film or star in another Warner Brothers production. Yes, do that. That's good news to say that, because poor Leslie Grace, I would like to have seen her in this movie. I said that pretty clear. So if they're going to let her get somewhere else to work, that's good for her. It's unfortunate. She still gets a payday for it, but hopefully she gets a project now that she'll be able to go ahead and thrive on. And the buzz that she never got her other movie pushed out will be a very sweet story for this young, beautiful girl to get out there and be noticed, which will be good. Now, they say here in this story from Variety that Marvel Studios' style of integrated film and TV storytelling would be also far more complicated to implement at Warner Brothers Discovery. With Feige, any TV productions for DC would also need to flow through HBO Max chief J.C. Bloys, and Warner Brothers TV chair Channing Dungay. So there's not as much independence. There's too many other people to answer to sign off on new movies. And whoever takes the job of dealing with The Flash, because right now we're having all the issues where Ezra Miller has been getting arrested multiple times, a downfall of a star that people were really on because The Flash was such an interesting character to bring out, and it's just not working out well. Now, Hamada could still be considered that new person. He might get to continue what he's doing, but he would have to obviously restructure as planned by David Zaslav's plan. He's widely respected a lot for his keen story sense and relationships with talent, keeping a low profile in the business of big egos, endearing him to staff. But he'd already been mistreated by the company with Discovery, and that he'd already had issues when it came to death threats after Justice League star Ray Fisher publicly accused the executive of undermining an investigation into misconduct allegations related to reshoots on that film. And then Batgirl being canceled almost made him decide to resign. But the new studio chiefs, the new movie chiefs, actually convinced him to stay. At least until Black Adam opens in October. But we don't know if he's going to stay. And then you look at the TV future of the DC projects. The Green Lantern series is still looking to move forward. It's the biggest, most ambitious DC adaptation ever done by the prolific producer, Berlanti. And then you have the DC anthology series Strange Adventures, which has been taken down. A Wonder Twins HBO Max movie with KJ Apa and Ezra Bomay has also been dropped. Well, that sucks. I don't know. I mean, yeah, HBO Max for Wonder Twins, that makes total sense, right? And then you also had Harley Quinn, which was currently streaming in its third season. It might be safe, but there's no idea if live-action DC shows like Titans and Doom Patrol will be renewed after new seasons of both shows premiering later this year. And then there was J.J. Abrams' plans for a Justice League Dark series, which will be an Avengers-style show featuring DC characters from the titular team. Then also you have spin-off characters like Constantine and Madame Xanadu in active development. But we don't know what's going to stay. We don't know what's going to go. There's a lot of names here that everybody's concerned about, and that's concerning everybody. Now, let's get into the story about The Flash, because that's another issue going on, because as we keep seeing, you just look at Ezra Miller himself. He's just going through a lot. And there's a number of different scenarios going on with that movie we're hearing about now, where the worst case scenario is that the movie gets scrapped and never makes a movie theater. So there's three paths the studio's considering right now for this, for The Flash. And here's what they got. Now, the movie doesn't come out until June of next year. So there are three scenarios as to what they do going forward with this movie. A source talked to Hollywood Reporter of the situation, and this is the three scenarios. First, the Warners received indications that Ezra Miller, 29 years old, whose mother's accompanied the actor recent days, would seek professional help returning to their home farm in Vermont after being away. And then Miller could give an interview at some point explaining the erratic behavior over the past few years and could do some limited press for The Flash, and the movie would go to cinemas as planned. Second, if Miller doesn't reach out for help, the Warners could still release the film and not expect Miller to play a prominent role in terms of marketing and publicity, and Miller being the Flash going forward would not happen. The role will be recast. The third is if Ezra Miller just goes and falls apart. It would see the Warners killing the movie outright, as it could not be reshot with a different actor. This $200 million film would be scrapped. Wow. That's where we are right now. Miller's been in part of this character since 2014. The same year a Solo the Flash film was announced, and the development process went a long time. Multiple directors coming over and giving the years until filmmaker Andy Muschietti finally got the project off the ground. The movie features Michael Keaton back as Batman for the first time in 30 years. Ben Affleck is a different version of Batman. And we've already gotten introduced to the Flash in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Suicide Squad in 2016. And then having a major role in Justice League a year later, 2017. The film has been testing well, they said, even as Miller's legal woes continue to mount. And so earlier this week, Ezra Miller was charged with felony burglary, allegedly stealing bottles of alcohol from a Vermont home. Vermont State Police notified May 1st of a potential burglary that several bottles of alcohol were taken from the residence while the homeowners were not present. This guy's it's just falling apart. This guy has to go to rehab. And who knows if he can make it through. But I don't think you can bring this guy back. It doesn't sound like you can. There's something very disturbing that's going on with him because he's obviously changed a lot. Without going into detail as to why, but you can just tell something happened. So all we can hope is that this guy gets some professional help. So with the DC Universe and the shakeup of movies going on there, then there's the ongoing story about movies coming out this year. I mean, the movie theaters are reliant upon the big budget box office superhero or franchise movies. That's what's going on. Because I keep looking at the end of this year. It doesn't look that good. Not as much as it did before. Like, I'm really struggling right now to find movies to watch in the weekends. And at the moment, I'm going to be watching a limited release movie this weekend with Emily the Criminal, which is Aubrey Plaza's feature movie. And I forget who else is in it. I'm going to watch that this weekend because it's a big event available, which is nice. In that movie, you got Theo Rossi's in there. Megan Echiwokunokwe. Wow, she always thought to say her name, but she's a good actress and she's very good looking. So you got that. It's interesting. I'm going to watch that and check it out. And then as the other movies you got for the rest of the year, Bodies comes out this weekend. But then after that, Beast with Idris Elba, Dragon Ball Super Hero, which I probably will watch the following week. Why not? I watched Dragon Ball Broly. I'll watch this too. The Invitation, which it's Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones is in that movie. And then you got Barbarian. Like, there's not a lot of movies coming out after this. You got Clerks 3. There's not a lot of big name movies. There's just some that are kind of like out there. Avatar will come out September 23rd, but that's the re-release. But that'll get people probably coming by. And other than that, of the big box office movies they normally get to, Halloween Ends October 14th. Black Adam is October 21st. Amsterdam looks like a great movie for November 4th. Black Panther or Wakanda Forever. Armageddon Time. And there's not much after that. Not much at all. Avatar The Way of Water. Christmas Time. Shazam Fury of the Gods. Also Christmas Time. And Puss in Boots The Last Wish. Like, we get a drop off. We're not getting the kind of level of movies like we did with Top Gun. Maverick or Doctor Strange or, we're just not getting that right now. So the movies are just kind of slowing down. I'm not sure what the whole switch around of movies are going on in the first place. It's just kind of slowed down. So here's what we got. So you had movies like Jurassic World, Dominion, Lightyear, Elvis, and Top Gun Maverick making a lot of money. And a couple of surprise hits also working well with A24's Everything Everywhere All at Once that did really well. And Downton Abbey of a New Era also did well. Then you had Thor Love and Thunder, Jordan Peele's Nope, and The Minions Rise of Gru. And at the moment, the summer box office has generated over $3 billion for 2022, according to ComScore. And that's just 18% behind 2019. And up over 134% from last year. So people have come back to the movies. And I would just say this, the numbers for the movies would have gone a lot better if we would have seen some more movies still come out and not get pushed around. And that was the big problem I had. A lot of movies got switched around and moved over, and I didn't get why. But it's what they did. The other thing they said here, which makes the point, there have been 36% fewer releases in 2022 compared to pre-pandemic years. Despite a spattering of studio releases on the calendar, there's a noticeable and probably dramatic lack of surefire hits until Black Panther Wakanda Forever opens in November. What do you got going in the meantime? The Woman King with Viola Davis comes out September 16th. Olivia Wilder's Mindbender Don't Worry Darling September 23rd. And Billy Eichner's Meet Cute Bros on September 30th. And we have to see how well things would go with Black Adam October 21st. That's all you got until the holidays, basically. Then there's some other movies as well. Ticket to Paradise, George Clooney, Julia Roberts. That's for an older crowd. Let's see what that does. There's not a lot of movies that come out that are limited, that are going to have a whole lot of space. It's just really, it kind of just sucks. We're just looking for anything out there, and it's just not out there right now. So the movies are kind of suffering. And when you have a lack of DCEU movies right now that could be pushed to box office, we're going to get a ramp up of that. Marvel's also going to get a ramp up too. But then we got to see what else is going to come out that's going to really push forward the release schedule next year. Because this year was going to be a hodgepodge. They moved a lot of stuff around. There was still pandemic concerns. So this year, the fact that it got as well as it did by this point of the summertime can't be that bad. At least we got to this point. We had some successes this year. Had a couple of movies hit over $1 billion. That's good. When you look at the overall picture of where we have gone this year in the box office, this year, you're looking at, as we said, Top Gun overall, $1.3 billion, $665 billion gross for 2022. And Doctor Strange, when you look at that as a feature, that's made almost $1 billion, $953 million, just shy of it. Jurassic World Dominion, that pulled in $965 million. A lot in their billion movies. Batman, $767 billion worldwide. So your top five is performing very well. Minions Rise of Gru, $765,000. So again, you're getting movies 3/4 to over $1 billion, making bucks overall. That's great. And that tells you everything that needs to be known of who's doing good overall. So that's at least a good thing. And if you look at the genres for the movies this year, among the movies that have been put out, action has made the most this year, making up 55% of the share of, what is this here? $2.7 billion that they made in action movies, and adventure movies, $750 million. Meanwhile, comedy is down at $500 million. There have been 38 movies come out for comedy, 80 movies in drama that have pulled $400 million. And then you look at horror, that's gotten $300 million off of 23 movies. Thriller suspense movies, just under $100 million. Like, it's really kind of just a drop off. Oh, not a lot of R movies. Well, there was a lot of R movies this year, but didn't make that much money. R movies, there were 66 that came out this year. 52 PG-13, PG at 31. And that's it. That's where we're at with all of it. So that's a look at that. Now let's go ahead and look into these big corporate behemoths, these media giants, that even though they're struggling with the box office, you know, whatever they're going to put out, They're struggling with their streaming services, their network and TV offerings, all their linear, non-linear projects. They're still making hand over foot some big bucks. Deadline.com talks about Wall Street pros and cons of streaming price hikes while Disney's earnings boost stock. Disney stock rose 5% on Thursday as a record. And one of the things they talked about as an announcement which helped to boost their price was their ad-supported tier of Disney Plus will launch on December 8th, and that will be offered for $7.99. The ad-free service now will be $10.99. 40% hike. And it widens the range of potential outcomes for Disney over the next 2 years. So, as we knew, Disney Plus was put out at $6.99. They made a little dollar jump. Now they're going to make a big jump. So the trial period is over. What do you do next? That's to go double digits and put $10 down on Disney Plus. That's not the bundle. That's just Disney Plus. And then you got ESPN now going to bump up from $6.99 to $9.99. And Disney Plus is also going to increase the highest price of Hulu by 15%. And then the Disney ESPN Hulu bundle is going to also increase. And then the new subscribers can add the ad-free Disney Plus, Hulu with ad-supported ESPN, a 42% premium to the bundle price. They're all going to go up. And that's in response to Netflix raising prices for all U.S. subscribers. Their cheapest plan is $10 a month, and now for HD streaming, $15.50 a month, or $20 a month for 4K video. Netflix is trying to get more money in. They're cutting on their content costs, much like Warner Brothers Discovery. And now they're raising their prices on subscribers. On top of that, because of the fact they're not getting as many subscribers, they lost 200,000 in the last quarter. And the second quarter, they lost close to 1 million subscribers. And they had done price hikes for $1 every year since 2014. So Wall Street likes the price hikes. Makes more money for them. Disney's direct-to-consumer segment had an operating loss of $1.1 billion for the quarter. Disney Plus added 14.4 million subscribers, 6.1 for core Disney Plus, 8.3 million for Hotstar in India. So they're having the way out and even out the fact that while they're making less money on their linear content, their non-linear content is making more. Their parks are up, but for how long? That's the other part that can think about as well. Now, there's another story comes out talking about Netflix we should bring up here, about how Netflix's subscriber exodus is on a price hike. The current price before this new jump is $16.96 a month, and now they're going to go up to $20. So there's a report that came out that says it's not necessarily that Netflix has a content problem. The word is saying that there's also a lot of things going on where there's a subsequent drop-off in viewers, wider inflationary pressures furthering Americans' purchasing power and disposable income. And the fact that prices are going back up is like cable all over again, according to this BGR.com article. So these things changing up are just going to hurt everybody. And then what are you going to do then? I mean, when you look at it right now, and I think to myself, okay, at the moment, a full-fledged AT&T Universe plan, which I have at home, $130. Okay, and that includes the full UTV 450 package that is HBO, Showtime, Stars, all their accompanying channels, and then the on-demand access online or to the app or whatever. With all their channels. All the premium channels, all the sports channels. And then you try to ask yourself, how much is it going to cost to get all these other networks at the a la carte? So you get Amazon Prime, you buy the Prime, which is what, like $160 a year now? So you're paying roughly like $8 a month for that. And includes Amazon Prime. The Prime Video. And then you put down soon to be $10 for Disney Plus. There's 18. Let's put down then the Disney bundle, or let's just say, let's say Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. So that's another $20 right there, 40. And then say you want Peacock, another 50 right there. You're getting up there in price. When there's other options you can watch TV, do you really need to watch these other shows? The streaming services really need to realize, we know that your content's optional. Sure, you get buzz from all these different shows. Apple TV Plus, I don't even know how much that costs, but that's another one. When you look at all this, you say to yourself, man, is there enough for me to go and really just take the time I need to go and watch all this programming? They're pricing themselves out. There's no surprise there at all. It was going to happen anyway. And these are the things that don't get considered across the board. Okay, I got a few more other stories to bring up here before I wrap things up. A lot of it's going to be radio and music coming up right now, and podcasting. So let me go through a couple of these real quick. Digital Music News talks about there's a new congressional pitch for a bill for a new streaming royalty. And one of the members, a progressive Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, is drafting legislation for a new streaming royalty being paid directly to artists. And what they're saying is that there's a letter that came out from Rashida Tlaib's office on the royalty legalization. And she says that while the music community has experienced an economic revival with the success of streaming music services like Spotify and Apple Music, the current regulation or codified streaming music royalty program has driven a race to the bottom. Streaming music platforms' payouts per stream are minuscule and declining each year, leaving working musicians with little of the income generated by these platforms. And this resolution would call for the creation of a new streaming royalty paid directly to artists, similar to how satellite radio royalties are paid out via sound exchange. This model would employ the Copyright Royalty Board to calculate and distribute royalties for streaming services. It's basically going after Spotify. The payouts that currently right now are 1/3 of a penny to 1/2 of a penny for each stream, with some sources indicating the rates even lower than that. This pro-rata model would favor artists who rack up millions upon millions of streams, as well as the major labels to which many of the same acts are signed. So this is one of those things, it's just speculation. It's a bill that's being proposed. So if there's anything more concrete, we'll talk about it. Meanwhile, while the movie theaters did really well over the summer, the concerts have gone really well over the summer. More tickets have been sold in 2022 than all of 2019, according to Live Nation reports, their highest quarterly concert attendance ever. But then again, some of these artists are asking for a lot of money. We're talking about how Bruce Springsteen has tickets now being sold over $1,000. Average entry prices remained affordable at $33, up 5% from 2019. There's that going for you. Another digital music news story talks about radio being hypocritical. Excuse me. That's the word, isn't it? A former lawmaker comes in and says that they look at the Q2 2022 earning reports for iHeartMedia and Cumulus Media, both companies with private equity firms owning them and holding a large amount of their debt. The companies achieved improved revenue and net income on the quarter, and that a former lawmaker continues to ask for terrestrial stations to begin paying recorded royalties. There have been recent radio royalty bills emerging in recent years. We know about the American Music Fairness Act we've talked about on this show. And Representative Joe Crowley, who's now chairman of Music First and RIA backed organization, is looking at these second quarter numbers for these radio companies and saying, well, then that needs to say that these greedy broadcasters are brazenly showing their hypocrisy. At the same moment they are spotlighting the dramatic profit increases on Capitol Hill, they whine to lawmakers about how they can't afford to pay music creators a single cent when their music is being played on AM/FM radio. Yeah, that's the idea. Which one is it? I mean, are you making money and then you can't pay it, you can't afford it? We know these corporate giants are just milking away, and they're going to just complain about the fact that the music's not there. Well, radio continues to staggeringly decline, slowly but surely. And if they keep fighting their way through it, I guess that's what they're going to do. So there's one other story I want to bring up. There's three more stories I want to bring up that's on podcasting. Fred Jacobs, who I always like to go ahead and quote from, talks about, for radio, is Gen Z the iceberg or the opportunity? And what he's referring to is radio going to try to go after teens and college kids? Those in their formative years when it comes to pretty much everything, including how they spend their time and entertain themselves. Does radio have a space for this younger audience? Well, they haven't put out the music to do so. And he refers to the iceberg that's out there. And he refers to a story that came out from Fred Jacobs about the ageification of broadcast radio. But let me take this from James Van Alsdal. He's a Chicago radio pro. He's also a podcaster, works for Accenture. And he wrote a blog post saying that many of the topics talk about, see that iceberg, you're steering right into it. And he asked friends, what would they do to fix radio? No need to mention specific stations, personalities, or executives' names. I'm more interested in big picture responses. Are there subtle tweaks that can get done? That can get the job done. Sweeping, scorched earth change that needs to happen. Can the average age of today's listener be brought down from its current age of 55 years old? He also mentions how it's interesting how things like records and physical media and Polaroid cameras are still selling to younger generations, but the cool nostalgia wave has never washed over radio, which is a good point. And then he says, Fred Jacobs says, there's no answer. Radio's 25 to 54-year-old obsession aside, the fact radio has not conceded the Gen Z opportunity is a big miss. And there are all these existential threats facing radio broadcasters. It's going to very much miss that silver stake. It hasn't even boarded the boat with Gen Zs, a generation that will be bigger than boomers. They are also more diverse than the demographic groups that have come before, posing even more challenges but more opportunities to marketers who connect and engage with them. Right. To attract the Gen Z audience, you need to be much more cognizant of what's new, what's trending, what goes viral, and play those songs constantly with limited commercials. And then you have the fact that the genres that fit for these formats really don't fit anymore, which is why I keep saying CHR needs to turn back into a top 40 format. Which, by the way, BBC Radio does a very good job of. Even Capital Radio does a good job of that in the UK. Like those European countries, they figured that out. They had to do something different and change. And they did. Are they able to go and engage their younger audience anyway? But that's not being done here. With social media, Gen Z is redefining the landscape, freaking out the incumbent social platforms. The rapid rise of TikTok hasn't just ushered a new form of entertainment, information, and marketing. It is reshaping the way in which we socialize. The impact of TikTok has pushed most of the other social media platforms to pivot to a short-form video format. They're not only trying to copy TikTok, but they're changing the essence of why consumers use these platforms in the first place. The redefinition of Gen Z is sweeping, and every media and tech brand is being impacted. To the fact that Google is not even being used as the search results for their search results or as a search engine. They're using TikTok and Instagram for searching, for SEO. How about that? Well, the story I was going to bring up, but I brought up over here. Cox Media Group purchased Axios recently, a bold move by a newspaper company now dedicated to serving up local news from differently than its competitors. He brings up the point that there are young people embracing old media like turntables, old music like classic rock, and other retro artifacts from the past. And that there was a time when radio would have researched the opportunity and young programmers would have had their way to solutions. in the era where virtually every creative in radio was in their 20s and much more attuned to what was happening in real time. Yep. But they don't. And as he mentioned in the ageification of broadcast radio's previous post, the musical industry right now still has word nostalgia rules. And it's been that way for many years now. But there are fewer big hits outside of artists like Taylor Swift, Adele, and Bad Bunny, prompting the recent headline from the Wall Street Journal, Beyonce releases album Renaissance. Can she break the new music curse? And she did really well. Got her songs sprinkled all over the Hot 100 of Billboard, and including Break My Soul getting to the number 1 spot this week. Congratulations to her. And these are some of the things that are going on. So the age gap right there with radio is very prominent. What about podcasting? It's a different story. Edison Share of Ear Research put out some interesting information about podcast listening and when people listen to podcasts. And this is what they determined. Number one, if you look at the time periods when people actually listen, based on what radio would normally have as a format of what time slots people listen to the most, it used to be the mornings and the afternoon drive would be the most. But in this case, the Share of Ear Research says that it's a pretty even mix throughout the day. 6 to 10 a.m., people are downloading and listening to podcasts, 25% of the audience. Another 26% between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., that's normally around my area. 2 to 6 p.m. is 21%, 6 to 10 p.m. is 15%, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is 11%, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. is 3%. And then the other part they put in here and said was about half of podcast links is done before 2 p.m. And instead radio.com put a little more information behind that. And they talked about they covered all 7 days of the week equally represented, with both weekends and weekdays contributing to its findings. That's an interesting stat they come up with the time of day that people listen to a podcast, which tells me that that's something as a podcaster you should pay attention to. Because of the fact that when you time out your programming, unless it's timeless, programming like I do right now with the Rest Goes Real podcast and the Broadcasters podcast, okay? I mean, I normally release these episodes out about overnight anyway. My programs are released in that 10 to 2 a.m. period, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And so I make sure my programs are all set to go and get released beforehand to reach that 50% in the morning and afternoon times. Like even my Depraved and Debaucherous series, the release of that program, I put it at 9 a.m. on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays on audio and video. And I've noticed my numbers go better because I used to put out the video version. I think I used to put that out at noon, but now I put it out earlier. And it's actually done better. The fact that I put it out at 9 a.m. is enough time for people to go and catch up. And then in the middle of the day, they're downloading and listening to it or streaming it, whatever they're doing, which is good. That's what I want. So there is something to be said about when you decide to drop your latest episode. That this Edison Share of Ear research does tell you a lot. You want to make sure you have that content available new first thing in the morning or in the afternoon. You don't want to make people wait until the end of the day. So when it comes down to people doing morning shows, we're talking about programming that is that day. Okay, same day podcasting. You're going to drop something that happens with news or current events happening same day. You need to drop that as quickly as you can, which requires a very fast turnaround. But meanwhile, for myself, like whatever programming I have here, Broadcasters Podcast goes out Friday morning, early Friday morning, and then you're available to have it all the weekend. With the Rest of Us podcast, it's Thursday mornings, and you're all across doing that too. Like it works out well. So it's something to be said about making sure that your shows drop earlier as opposed to later in the day. So that's a pretty good rule of thumb to think of. It actually says a lot about the audience and what they're doing and listening. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. That is the Broadcasters Podcast. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoyed our movies you're going to go see. Maybe I'll tell you something about Emily the Criminal when I come back. And that's how we're going to leave it. Thanks again for listening. Make sure to give a 5-star review here on the program. Check out the newly redesigned broadcasterspodcast.com. And more importantly, if you want to leave any comments or anything like that, I hope you will do so by going to broadcasterspodcast.com and go down to the bottom of the page. You'll see the contact form where you can add information there, and I hope you will. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening in. Come back next week for another Broadcasters Podcast. Until then, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.